Elena had only lived in North Hollow for a few months when she first heard about the last bus. It came up in a conversation at work, one of those slow Friday afternoons when people swap strange local stories over stale coffee. "You ever seen Bus 103? Asked Darren from IT. Elena shook her head. "It only runs after midnight," he said, lowering his voice. "But it's not on any schedule. People say it shows up when someone really needs a ride, someone who's lost or desperate or running from something." A few of the others chuckled, but Darren looked serious. "Thing is, if you get on, you don't always come back. Sometimes the bus never reaches the next stop." Elena laughed politely, brushing it off as a weird joke. Still, something about the story stuck with her. One night, after working late and missing her usual bus, she found herself walking home alone. Her phone had died hours ago. The streets were quiet, empty. Then, just as she passed the old cinema on Monroe Street, she heard the hiss of brakes. A bus pulled up beside her. The sign above it blinked. 103. It looked old, older than any bus she'd seen in the city. The lights inside were dim. The driver didn't move, just stared straight ahead. Elena hesitated. Maybe it was just a detour. Maybe she was tired, imagining things. But it was cold, and the thought of walking another 30 minutes home didn't sound great. She stepped on board. There were only two other passengers. One, a woman who stared blankly out the window. The other, a man in a worn suit, hunched over as if asleep or hiding. The doors closed behind her with a soft hiss. She didn't even tell the driver where she was going. The bus pulled away from the curb. At first, everything seemed normal. They passed familiar buildings, empty intersections. But soon, Elena noticed the bus wasn't following any route she recognized. The city outside the windows began to look different, older, dimmer. She turned to ask the driver a question, but when she looked up, the seat was empty. Elena blinked. The driver's seat was definitely empty now. No silhouette, no sound, just the steady motion of the bus as it rumbled through streets she didn't recognize. She stood slowly, gripping the back of a seat to steady herself. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice barely louder than the hum of the engine. The woman near the window didn't turn. The man in the suit hadn't moved. Elena walked toward the front. "Is this some kind of prank?" she asked the empty cabin. Her voice echoed too much, like the bus was bigger than it should be. She reached the front and peered behind the plastic divider. Nothing. Just the large steering wheel turning slowly on its own, as if guided by invisible hands. A low beep sounded behind her. She turned. The man had raised his head and was now watching her. His face was pale and tired, his eyes sunken. "You shouldn't be standing," he said, his voice hoarse. "It's safer if you sit." Elena stared at him. "Who's driving this thing?" He didn't answer, just looked back down at his lap. The woman by the window spoke without turning around. "If you ask questions, it gets longer." "What does that mean?" She finally turned. Her face looked off, like a still photograph that had been slightly stretched. "Just sit down. Pretend you're asleep." "That's what I did. That's how I made it back." "Back from where?" Elena whispered. Neither answered. The windows outside had gone completely dark now. No streetlights, no buildings, just an endless black. Then the bus slowed. With a loud hiss, the doors opened, and something stepped on. Elena backed into her seat, clutching the cold metal pole. Whatever had just stepped onto the bus didn't speak. It didn't even seem to have a face, just the vague outline of a person, darker than the shadows around it. It moved slowly down the aisle. As it passed, the lights flickered, and the air turned freezing. The man in the suit kept his head down. The woman by the window squeezed her eyes shut and whispered something under her breath, over and over. Elena tried to look away, but her gaze was locked on the thing. When it reached her row, it paused. The lights died for a moment, but it sat down across from her. Not next to her. Not beside the other passengers. Right across, in the seat facing hers. Now that it was closer, Elena could feel something. Memories, thus regret, but none of them were hers. A voice, low and without mouth, filled her head. "Where were you going?" She didn't answer. The voice again. "You wanted to leave something behind." She thought of her apartment, her job, her failed engagement, the hollow feeling she'd been carrying for months. Maybe she had wanted to disappear. The voice grew softer. "Everyone on this bus made a choice. You stepped on because you were ready to leave something. Or someone." The bus began to slow again. The lights returned. Through the window, Elena saw a familiar street. Her street. Just like she'd left it, dimly lit, quiet, safe. The door opened with a hiss. The voice whispered one final time. "This is your stop, if you still want it." Elena stood slowly. The other passengers didn't look at her. The shadow thing didn't move. She stepped off the bus into the cold night. When she turned around, bus 103 was already gone. No engine, no sound, just an empty street and a feeling like waking up from a dream you almost understood.